My name is Errollyn Wallen and I'm a composer. I was born in Belize, which is in Central America, it's in the Commonwealth, and I moved to London when I was 2 years old, and I live between London and the Highlands in Scotland. I had a really interesting childhood in that I was brought up by my aunt, who was white East End woman, and my uncle, who, was 100% Belizean, but he was a very Victorian type of person, so we brought up extremely strictly. It was my uncle who really instilled in us all the love and I would say the fear of poetry, because from a very young age we would have to come home after school and recite whole reams of Wordsworth and Longfellow. And also it was, I think, his idea that we would have piano lessons. And so he would make us listen to Radio 4 and copy the accents, which is why I speak like this. So he would always... We were kept very, very busy with sort of the idea of improving, bettering yourself. My uncle also played the violin and the mandolin, and it was so important, as it was for his generation of people in Belize, to be able to be, to know about literature, to know about the arts, to know about music, classical music. And I think there's a sort of perception that people from the Commonwealth, so for instance, don't know about English literature. And my uncle, who wanted to be a writer, absolutely revered Shakespeare. So for him to be in England was to be, with his literary heroes. Initially, I didn't know I was going to be a composer professionally. I was always writing music and playing music. It was part of my life. The thing I wanted to be was a dancer. And but I think once I decided to be a composer, the route was relatively straightforward in that I made it my business to try and find out the best route to study. I worked out actually at school that I used to look at school. I remember sitting in the library looking at Ravel and thinking about composers and thinking about what it took to be a composer. And I realised that I really wanted the very best education. And off of my own bat, aged about 17, I decided, okay, I'm going to go to Oxford University, and that's what I'm going to do. But the thing is, there was nobody to help me to do the entrance exam. So the entrance exam is sort of equivalent to the first year of undergrad study. So I remember going to Foyles and taking a book about counterpoint out and trying to teach myself all these things. Well, needless to say, I failed that entrance exam. And then I decided, I was having piano lessons with a great pianist called Edith Vogel. And it was her, she said, I think you're a composer, Errollyn. And I rediscovered my love of dance. And there was a course at Goldsmiths College, which is dance and music. But after about a term of that, I realised the standard, both in the dance and music, wasn't really, it wouldn't get me very far. And I decided just to concentrate on music, partly because I was just composing and playing all the time, just naturally. And I thought, well, this is what I must do. And I did an undergrad at Goldsmiths College. Then I did a master's at King's College London, where I studied with Nicola Lefanu. And then much, much later, I did an MPhil at Cambridge, and I studied with Robin Holloway. But by that time, I was already a professional composer. And my way into composing, my family, nobody had studied music at university in my family. I think nobody in my family had actually been to university here. So I had to work it all out for myself. And yeah, that was my route into my education. I come from a very, very unusual family in that I wasn't brought up by my mother and father. And so my aunt and uncle, who were wonderful people, but they were very, very, very protective. They were always sort of looking over their shoulder, I suppose in fear that my mum and dad would take us back to live with them in New York. Well, that actually never happened, but it meant that instead of having two overbearing parents, we actually had four. I can't say that I was really encouraged in my music making. It's something that I just had to find myself. That, I was sent to piano lessons and I did well, but I think it was only when I was about 13 a music teacher said I was good at music. I had actually no idea I was even in any way talented. It's just something I loved doing. And so I sometimes think, imagine if I'd had a family who would have given me some praise. That would have been amazing. But the thing about my music making, I don't feel I have anything to prove, but that when you do something that takes you out of your family's normal realm, for a child that's quite, you become a little bit of a warrior. You have to forge your own path, and there was no such thing as a role model. But I don't see that as a particular hardship. It's given me a lot of self-reliance, but I would have loved to have been able to share more of what I did with my family. Style is something that really does interest me. As a musician, I've always been interested in the building blocks of music. So when I'm writing a piece of music, I think of myself as an explorer. So style is usually the last thing on my mind. I'm interested in the working out, say, of an interval, certain thinking about, for example, I'm very interested in the foreground structure, say, rhythm as it might apply to one bar or motif, but then the overall perception of time in a piece of music. I'm very interested in transitions. These are things that the mechanics of how a piece is put together. But I remember as a student, people would say to me, "Oh, your music has a very definite style," but I wasn't trying to have a style. I think the things that characterize it are sort of, often there's a quite distinctive harmonic or rhythmic sense. I mean, it's a surprise to people to know that, masters, I was exclusively studied serial music, 12-tone music. I was steeped in that music. It's the music I love. As a teenager, I knew all the latest composers, all the latest works. I remember for my A-level, being able to write, I knew all the new pieces that were being premiered. I listened avidly to contemporary music on Radio 3. So, but the music I write myself has actually hit a lot of hints of the music I listened to as a child. So my music is very free. It makes allusions to things, to both popular music and more, you might call it, more modernist music. Do you know, a real turning point for me was the writing of the opera The Silent Twins, where I really got the bug that music can tell you everything you need to know about characters on stage, and the multi-dimensional nature of writing opera, where the instruments themselves are characters, and it's just so absorbing. I think The Silent Twins is honestly, I think it's a very, very good work, and with libretto by April De Angelis. And I'm very excited to know that work's going to tour in the States in 2022. I'm also proud of a work called Carbon 12, which was an oratory about the history of coal mining in South Wales, commissioned by Welsh National Opera. It's a 50-minute oratorio, has about 3 or 4 choirs, a brass band, massive orchestra, about 2 main soloists, and then say 4 smaller solo worlds. It's on such an epic scale, and I think once you can crack doing these epic things, I think I have discovered I have a gift for writing for the voice. But I found with writing for Carbon 12, it was a telling of a story totally outside my own experience about people. I'm not from Wales, and that I realised that everything I've learned as a composer was at the service of events that actually happened, and that the audience who were there knew about the veracity of what I was writing about. It was a very big challenge, but I'm very proud of that work. It was emotional, but also, I think, technically, it was an achievement. A really important ongoing project of my life is the songs I've written. And I started to write these shortly after leaving, doing my master's. And I was surprised, these songs just popped out. They're songs that I sing now myself, either solo or with a band. And I feel really free in them. I don't know how to describe them. It's very important that I write these songs without any sense of they're not necessarily for the commercial market, they're not necessarily classical music, but I'm very free in them, and I sing and play them myself. That gives me an enormous amount of pleasure. When I started out as a young composer, when I was a student, I would read about composers and the way they worked, and I would really store this information. And there seemed to be a lot of composers do a lot of pre-compositional sketches or develop, a whole toolbox before they start. And I remember saying, as a student, what would it be like if I just sat down and write some music and just see what happened? And I thought, well, that will probably last me for a year or 2 years. But actually, that's what I do. To me, if I'm going, writing music is quite a slow, can be laborious, and I've got to make it an adventure for myself too. So, I'm about to start to write a work for mezzo soprano and orchestra, and what it is you start to, the work creeps up on you till you sort of almost visualize, you can almost feel, you can touch that work, and then begins the process of making it work in sounds, which is quite it's scary to start there, but I'm thinking so deeply about this piece, and I can, it's like, how do you then find the notes? How do you make it work in time? I've always loved music. A lot of people love music. There was no way I was particularly encouraged to go into the world of music as a child. In fact, teacher would say to me, this is classical music, it's not your music, Errollyn. So I was aware that actually it wasn't necessarily the world of classical music didn't fling their arms open and embrace me, but my love of music has remained the same as that as a 9-year-old child, which is, I found a place where I could be absolutely free, and where somehow your mind is totally absorbed in something outside yourself, but which you feel very safe and complete in. And that is still my identity now. If I'm ever stuck in life, and I suppose as you become better known, people have an idea of what you are and what you represent. To me, music is my guide, and that place and that sensation of being able to be absolutely free. And the idea that as a composer I love performing too, but I love as a composer you disappear, so you yourself not there. The notes, the music have to be everything. And I've never got over the magic of the fact you write music and you can walk into a room of complete strangers and they're playing your music as you intended, but that it's free and it's in the world. That to me is the biggest miracle. When I consider my training, I'm still surprised by the music I myself produce. But always I wanted to write music that I would want to hear myself. Music that is, I think my music has a certain directness to it. But I do really want to connect with people everywhere, not just specialist. I don't want to be part of any particular clique. So I'm always, so for instance, when I had to write a big piece for the Paralympic ceremony, the opening ceremony, I remember the thing that helped me write that work, which was to an audience of 1 billion people around the world, I thought I'd like to write something that my dad would like. And my dad absolutely loves music, but that was my guiding. It just helps me to think of people I know and love to write the music. So what is my aesthetic? I think that with my music, I want to take the listener on a journey. I think something that does concern me is that, I take my work seriously. It's my life's work. That's what, my life is dedicated to writing music. And then I've been in situations where I remember getting a very, very big commission for something that was televised. And the television producer saying at rehearsal, "Oh my God, it's actually good." And saying that to my face. Some conductor once said to me, "You're a novelty, so I hope you've got a pension, because when the novelty wears off, you won't have a career. So I realised that other people's perceptions of me, I have to keep them at arm's length. If I let them in, I think life would be way more difficult. But actually, I'm a bit of a rebel, and I quite enjoy playing with people's perceptions of me. It's funny. I have quite a thick skin, but I remember there was a Q&A, and just before work was premiered. It was work for large chorus and orchestra. It was a big work, and the commissioner was asked why they'd commissioned me, and they said, "Oh, well, it's because they felt it was important to commission a black person." And to me, that is anti-music, because I don't listen to Bart thinking, "Oh yeah, he had a cute hairstyle." It's the music, but I also think we live in a time where the perception of a composer is sometimes nothing to do with the music they're actually writing. And I understand that we live in a visual age. So I'm sure I would have got some commissions simply because I'm black and it looks, it's come back to me. That was the reason. I just stick to my own path and think, just got to try a good piece of music. But yes, there's no way around it. I'm black, I'm a woman. At the moment, and I'm really, really pleased about the attention being made on composers. But it's also, I've always thought about those composers who were like me, who worked and flourished, wrote great music decades before me, who we don't actually hear about, who have been quietly dismissed. So I think about my ancestors, my forebears as well. I've done so many things in my professional life. As well as being a composer, I've produced whole shows, I've produced whole operas and taken them to festivals. I also, in many ways, act like my own manager and publish my own music. I'm a collaborator. I've worked with filmmakers, I've worked with dancers, I've worked with theatre directors. I've worked as a musical hostess on a 21-part television game show with comedians. Tap dance on that same show. I have worked as a dancer. I've been a keyboard player in bands. I've made a dance film for Channel 4. I'm very proud that I've co-wrote a song with an astronaut, and that he took all my music with him into outer space. One of the opportunities that I really wish I could have taken up, I was in my 20s and I got a call to ask me to play in the circus. I think it was just for a couple of nights, but I really wish I'd done that. A composer's not always the best judge of their own music, but I've been surprised how much people really love my cello concerto. I think that's a lovely way in. That's music written with all my love for my friend Matthew Sharp, and that music is, I think that's a good work. I also love my song, What's Up Doc, because in a way that does encapsulate the joyful part of me. I think this is a very important time for composers to not just look into their own communities and themselves and think about just their own aesthetic, but to think about their place and responsibility in the world.